Welcome back to another lesson with the language tutor. Le passé composé. In order to form the passé composé, we need to keep in mind the core formula. We must have a subject, an auxiliary verb, also known as the helping verb, which is avoir or être, conjugated in the present tense. And lastly, we must have the past participle of the main verb in that sentence. These are the steps to forming the passé composé. We must choose our auxiliary verb. It can be être or avoir. Secondly, we must form auxiliary correctly in the present tense, ensuring that the subject and the auxiliary verb that is conjugated are aligned. Thirdly, we must form the past participle of the main verb correctly. What are the endings? We'll find out. Lastly, we must apply agreement in number and gender with the subject when required. If we have the subject, the auxiliary, and past participle, then we have a complete sentence in the passé composé tense. So here we can see all the letters in black are the subject. We have je and elle. Then we have the auxiliaries. Number 1, we have an avoir auxiliary. Number 2, we have an être auxiliary that is correctly conjugated in the present tense in alignment with the subject. Lastly, we have the past participle of the main verbs. Manger, from manger, to eat, and partir, from the verb partir, to leave. Most verbs use avoir as the default auxiliary. Therefore, if you are unsure of which auxiliary verb to use, there's a high chance that you should choose avoir. Avoir is conjugated as follows: j'ai, tu as, il a, elle a, on a, nous avons, vous avez, ils ont, elles ont. Now, the verbs which use être as the auxiliary are verbs of movement or verbs that exemplify a change of state. They are neatly embodied in the group Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp. So these Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp verbs use être as the auxiliary. Être is conjugated as follows: je suis, tu es, il est, elle est, on est, nous sommes, vous êtes, ils sont, elles sont. Now, the verbs in the Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp list must be learned by heart in order to make your life easier. That way, you know when you see them or when you have to use any of these verbs from this list, the automatic auxiliary verb that you're going to conjugate in the present tense is être. Devenir, revenir, monter, rester, sortir, venir, aller, naître, descendre, entrer, retourner, tomber, arriver, mourir, partir, sortir, and so on. Okay, so you need to learn these verbs by heart. If there is a need to learn the verbs from the Dr. Mrs. Vandertramp list, then the need to learn the past participle of these verbs exists as well. So here are the past participles of the verbs which use être as the auxiliary. Aller becomes aller, venir becomes venir, arriver, arrivé, partir, parti, entrer, entré, sortir, sorti. Tomber, tomber, rester, rester, retourner, retourner, naître, né. Mourir, mort, monter, monter, descendre, descendu, rentrer, rentrer, passer, passer. So the second set of verbs which use être as the auxiliary are the reflexive verbs. So we have examples from se lever, se réveiller, s'amuser, get up, wake up, and to have fun. Je me suis levé, I got up. Elle s'est réveillée, she woke up. Nous nous sommes amusés, we had fun. So let us learn the sentence structures and let us learn the verbs which require the H auxiliary. Dr. and Mrs. Vandertramp verbs and the reflexive verbs. Now, let's talk a bit about forming the past participle correctly. So, in English, the past participle is the completed action form of a verb. So, eat, the completed action of eat would be eaten or ate. See, seen, finish, finished. Okay, so that is the idea of what a past participle is. So that's why we need the past participle of the main verb in the sentence that we're writing or speaking about. Now, if the verbs are regular and end in er, we drop the er and we have the e accent aigu, added to the root of the word. So manger ends in er, and that becomes et. Parler ends in er, that becomes et parler. If the verb ends in ir and it's regular, finir and choisir being examples, the ir ending verbs become I ending in the past participle form. Finir becomes fini, choisir becomes choisi. Now, if the verb ends in re and it is a regular verb, the ending becomes u. So vendre becomes vendu, attendre becomes attendu. Again, we have to remember French and languages in general have irregular patterns. So those that break the rule that we just saw have to be learned by heart. So the verbs that are irregular have a different past participle structure and you just have to learn it by heart. Faire becomes fait, avoir becomes eu, être becomes été, prendre pris, mettre mis, offrir offert, pouvoir pu, vouloir voulu, devoir dû, voir vu, boire bu, lire lu, dire dit, écrire écrit, ouvrir ouvert, vouloir voulu, devoir dû. I think I already repeated those. So these are the main irregular verb past participle that you need to know. We need to apply agreement when required. Agreement only occurs between the subject and the past participle. When the auxiliary être is used, agreement is required, and past participle agrees with the subject in number and in gender. That means we need to know if the subject is feminine, then the past participle will have an E added. If the subject is plural, the past participle will have an S added. And we have some examples. Elle est arrivée has an E added because être is conjugated as the helping verb. Therefore, agreement is triggered between the subject and the past participle. Arrivé. So arrivé has an E added because the subject is elle, feminine. In number 2, S is added to the past participle because, again, the helping verb used is from être. We have sont, which is a helping verb, or the auxiliary verb, which is être conjugated in the present tense. Now, since that is the case, the subject and past participle must have agreement in number and gender. So, the subject is masculine and plural. So we know that past participles are in the masculine form naturally. And so the only thing that needs to be added is the S for plurality agreement. In number 3, the subject is both feminine and plural. The helping verb is être, that is conjugated in the present tense. Therefore, there needs to be agreement in number and gender between the subject and the past participle. So the past participle tomber will have an E added because the subject is feminine and an S added because the subject is plural. Lastly, we have nous sommes allés, where être again is used as the auxiliary or the helping verb. It's conjugated in the present tense. Therefore, once être is being used as the auxiliary, we need to have agreement between the subject and the past participle. The subject is plural. Therefore, we are going to add an S to the past participle. Now, if we are making a sentence where the main verb does not require the use of être, but the use of avoir as the auxiliary, there is no agreement. So, the subject and past participle do not agree. We have number 2, we have a feminine subject, elle, but we do not add an E to fini, the past participle, because the auxiliary is avoir. Now, there is an exception, and we're going to touch on that a little later. But right now, in general, this is the rule. If the auxiliary is avoir, you do not change your past participle so that it agrees with the gender and number of the subject. Let us look at how to form the past participle with negatives. Now, the ne and pas, or whatever negative formation, it could be ne plus, ne que, ne rien, all these negative formations must surround the auxiliary. So whatever is conjugated in the present tense of être or avoir has to be surrounded by the negative forms. And that is then followed by the past participle. If you look at number one, we have je n'ai pas mangé. We have the subject, and then we have the first part of the negative formation. We know the E is dropped because of the vowel and sound clash in the auxiliary E, which begins with a vowel. So we have n'ai pas. So it surrounds the auxiliary. Je n'ai pas mangé. Then we have a number two. We have a different auxiliary. We have an être auxiliary, which is conjugated in the present tense. However, the negative formation is surrounding the auxiliary and not the past participle. Right? So we have n'est pas. Same is true for number three. We surround the auxiliary avant with ne and pas. Let us look at how to ask questions with the Passé Composé form. Now, if the verb is a reflexive verb, we can ask T'es-tu levé tôt ce matin? Or tu t'es levé tôt ce matin? Number two, we have an être auxiliary verb just like we had in number one. In this case, you have Est-elle arrivée à l'école à l'heure? Est-elle arrivée à l'école à l'heure? So we have an inversion of the subject and the verb. Instead of elle est, we have est-elle. Number three, we have an avoir auxiliary being used. As-tu fini tes devoirs? As-tu fini tes devoirs? So I want you to also remember these sentences and use it as a template for when you want to ask questions in the perfect tense, in the passé composé tense. Now, I did mention that there's an exception to the rule about agreements between the past participle and the subject, where avoir is the helping verb, where avoir is the auxiliary. So here, let's go. The COD, or complément d'objet direct, is about agreement of the past participle with avoir when the direct object appears before the verb. Sounds confusing? We're going to break it down. So this is the exception to the rule. All right. So what is the direct object? In English, we have an example here. We have J'ai mangé la pomme, or I ate the apple. When you ask yourself the question, what did I eat? The apple. The response, the apple, is your direct object, which is the direct object of the verb, right? What the verb or what the subject is acting on. Okay? J'ai vu Marie. So I saw Marie. Therefore, Marie is the direct object of the COD, the direct object. Now, like I said previously, when we use avoir as a helping verb, there is no agreement. And the reason there is no agreement is in the case where the COD, or the direct object, comes after the verb, after the main verb. There's no agreement. So we have j'ai mangé la pomme. We do not have an extra E added. Or if we see j'ai vu Marie, we do not have an extra E added to vu, the past participle. because the object, in these cases, la pomme and Marie, they come after the verb. And they come after the helping verb. Therefore, they are not going to trigger an agreement between the past participle and the subject. In contrast, if the direct object comes before the verb, agreement takes place. So when the direct object moves from before the auxiliary, moves before the auxiliary in terms of the position, there is agreement between the past participle and the subject. So if we say la pomme que j'ai mangée, then we will add an e to manger because the position of the direct object, la pomme, is now before et manger, before the helping verb. So once the direct object is before the helping verb, there will be agreement between the past participle, in this case manger, and the subject, or the object that you're going to be describing, right? In these cases, we have agreement between the past participle and the direct object. Okay, la photo is feminine, so we add an e to pris. La robe is feminine, so we add an e to acheter. Les films is plural, so we add an s to vu. In all three cases, the helping verb is avoir. The original rule says there is no agreement, but we are dealing with the exception. So whenever we have the direct object appearing before the helping verb, we apply the exception to the rule, which is there will be agreement between the past participle and the subject, or the past participle and the direct object, if the direct object appears before the helping verb. So la photo, la robe, and les films, they begin the sentence, and therefore the helping verb from avoir comes after. And that's why we need to have agreement between la photo, la robe, and les films, and the past participles pris, acheté, and vu. Agreements can also take place using the direct object pronouns. So when direct objects are replaced by a pronoun, it also triggers agreement between the past participle and the subject or the direct object. So we have the direct object pronouns le, la, les, le apostrophe. So they sit before the verb and trigger agreement. J'ai acheté la robe. Here we see that there's no agreement with the past participle acheté. Why isn't there agreement? Because la robe, which is a direct object pronoun, comes after et acheté. It comes after the helping verb. So we apply the rule that avoir auxiliary verbs do not trigger agreement between the past participle and the subject. However, in the other sentence, we see that acheter has acquired an E because now we are making reference to la robe, which is the dress. It's feminine. Je l'ai acheté, which means I bought it. So the direct object is now replaced with a direct object pronoun. So la robe is now L apostrophe in the second sentence. And because we have a direct object pronoun present and the direct object pronoun is before the helping verb, we have agreement where we have agreement with the past participle. And an E is added because we are making the agreement with the direct object pronoun, which is feminine. It's making reference to la robe. All right. Finally, we're going to look at how to ask questions that refer back to the object, the direct object. Tu as vu la photo? Did you see the photo or have you seen the photo? Oui, je l'ai vu. So in this example, we see that the le apostrophe forces the agreement between the direct object and the past participle, and E is added. Why? Because the L apostrophe, which is a pronoun, replaces la photo. And what do we know about the gender number of la photo? It is feminine singular. Therefore, we need to add an E to the past participle. All right, we'll stop here for today. I'm going to pin some questions for you to put into the Passé Composé, and let's see how well you apply what you just learned. Ok, merci d'être là et on se verra bientôt. Au revoir, merci, au revoir.